The moment I stepped into the living room, the air felt thick with tension. There he was, Jake, waiting for me, his presence somehow both inviting and alarming. Our eyes locked, and he gave me a look that sent shivers down my spine, a seductive glint that was impossible to ignore. My heart raced, but guilt washed over me like a cold wave as I thought of Tom, my husband, who trusted me completely. "What are you doing here?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. The words felt like a betrayal, an accusation I wanted to throw at myself. Jake leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "Just thought I'd drop by. You look stunning." His words wrapped around me, warm and intoxicating, making it hard to breathe. The intimate setting of the room seemed to urge me closer, whispering promises I dared not entertain. What am I doing here? The question echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain that wouldn't let me go. I was trapped in a whirlwind of desire and guilt, each emotion battling for dominance. He stepped forward, closing the distance, and my pulse quickened. "I know this is complicated, but we can't ignore what's between us." "I shouldn't be here," I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. The words felt hollow, drowned out by the pounding in my chest. He reached out, brushing his fingers against my arm, igniting a fire I had buried deep. I wanted to pull away, to run back to Tom, yet I found myself standing there, torn between loyalty and the thrill of the unknown. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the precipice of something dangerous. I remember the day I first met Jake like it was yesterday. It was during a work event in Chicago, a bustling city filled with excitement and ambition. I was there representing my husband Tom's company, trying to make connections and build relationships. I had no idea that my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. As I entered the crowded room, my eyes scanned the faces, searching for someone I knew. That was when I saw him. Jake stood across the room, his confident posture and easy smile immediately drawing my attention. There was something about him that felt magnetic, almost like a force pulling me closer. I felt a flutter in my stomach that I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Hi, I'm Jake," he said, extending his hand toward me, his voice rich and inviting. I took his hand, and the moment our fingers touched, a spark ignited between us. I was taken aback by the intensity of that simple contact. "You're with Tom's team, right?" "Yes, I am," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm Sarah." From that moment on, we fell into easy conversation. Laughter came effortlessly, and I found myself leaning in closer, captivated by his charm. It felt wrong, yet exhilarating. I caught myself stealing glances at him while he spoke, mesmerized by the way his eyes lit up when he laughed. I shouldn't have felt this way. I was married after all, but the connection between us was undeniable. "Do you want to grab a drink?" Jake asked, his gaze searching mine. I hesitated for a moment, thinking of Tom, who was probably at home working late. But the thrill of the moment was too strong to resist. "Sure," I said, my heart racing as we made our way to the bar. We found a quiet corner, and the conversation flowed like the drinks we were sharing. I felt alive, more alive than I had in years. With every word, every laugh, the walls I had built around myself seemed to crumble. Our discussions were filled with playful banter and subtle flirtation. I found myself leaning closer, sharing stories I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. At one point, our fingers brushed again as we both reached for the same glass. It was electric. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and guilt. I thought of Tom, my husband, who trusted me completely. The guilt was there, lurking in the back of my mind, but it was overshadowed by the undeniable chemistry between Jake and me. "What are you doing here, Sarah?" Jake asked, his voice low and teasing. Shouldn't you be at home with your husband?" His words sent a shiver down my spine. I just needed a break," I stammered, unsure of how to explain my presence in that moment. "Sometimes breaks can lead to unexpected adventures," he replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I felt a rush of desire, but fear quickly followed. What was I doing? I was betraying the trust of the man I loved. Yet, the connection with Jake was intoxicating, pulling me deeper into a world I knew I shouldn't explore. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere around us felt intimate, as if we were the only two people in the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was happening between us. I was torn between the thrill of the moment and the sense of duty I felt towards Tom. Jake leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear. "You're captivating, you know that?" he whispered, sending a rush of warmth through me. My heart raced, and I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. "Thank you," I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to respond to such a compliment, especially coming from a man like him. As the night progressed, I could feel the tension building, a silent acknowledgement of the attraction between us. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, my heart torn between loyalty and desire. I couldn't help but wonder what could happen if I let go of my inhibitions, even just for a moment. "Can I see you again?" Jake asked, his voice serious now, the playful banter replaced with something deeper. I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding. "It's complicated." "Complicated can be exciting," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, searching for an answer I wasn't ready to give. I felt a rush of anticipation mixed with fear. What would happen if I agreed? Would I be crossing a line I could never come back from? The question echoed in my mind, but the thrill of possibility was intoxicating. "I'll think about it," I finally said, my voice shaky. I knew I was stepping into dangerous territory, but in that moment, the connection between us felt too strong to ignore. As the night came to an end, I walked away from Jake with a heavy heart. The memories of our first encounter lingered with me, filling my mind with images of laughter, connection, and unspoken promises. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, but the thrill of what could be was hard to resist. I returned to Tom that night, my heart a heavy mix of guilt and excitement. I was in a world of my own making, teetering on the edge of something I knew could change everything. I had met Jake, and I could never forget the way he made me feel. I stepped through the doorway into the living room, and my breath caught in my throat. There he was, Jake. He sat casually on the edge of the sofa, his presence both inviting and intimidating. The room felt smaller somehow, and the tension in the air was thick. I could feel my heart racing as our eyes met. "Hey," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. It was that look again, the one that made my insides flip. It was the same look he had given me the first time we met, but now it held so much more weight. "Hi," I replied softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Instantly, a wave of guilt washed over me. Tom, my husband, was out there somewhere, completely unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. How could I be here, feeling this rush of excitement when my commitment lay elsewhere? Jake leaned back, his gaze never leaving mine. "I wasn't expecting to see you," he said, his tone playful yet suggestive. I forced a smile, trying to play it cool, but inside my mind screamed, "What am I doing here?" The atmosphere was charged, almost electric. The way he looked at me made me feel beautiful, desired. It was intoxicating. The dim light in the room created an intimate setting that felt like a secret world just for us. "Thought I'd stop by," I said, attempting to sound casual. But my heart raced as I remembered the last time we had been together. The late nights spent working on that project, the way our conversations flowed effortlessly, the laughter we shared. It all felt so innocent in the beginning. "Glad you did," Jake replied, his voice low. He shifted closer, the space between us shrinking. I could feel the heat radiating off him, and for a moment, I was lost in that heat, forgetting everything but the two of us. "Jake, we shouldn't," I started, but he interrupted me. "Why not? We've got this connection, don't you feel it?" His eyes were piercing, and I could see the challenge in them. I swallowed hard. "I do," I admitted, feeling the truth hang in the air like a heavy mist. "But I'm married." "So what?" he said, his tone almost teasing. "Does that mean you can't feel? Doesn't that make it even more thrilling?" His words sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to deny him, to push back against the pull I felt towards him, but the allure was overwhelming. I looked away, trying to gather my thoughts, but all I could feel was the weight of my own desires battling against my sense of loyalty. "Tom trusts me," I said weakly, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. "Does he really?" Jake asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. "Or is he just oblivious to what's happening right in front of him?" I felt my cheeks flush. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," he said, leaning in even closer now, his breath warm against my skin. "But it's the truth. You're here, and you're not leaving. You want this, don't you?" I closed my eyes for a moment, battling the urge to give in. Every part of me screamed to take a step back, to remind myself of the vows I had made. But there was another part, a part that craved the thrill, the heat of his presence. "I shouldn't," I finally said, my voice shaky. "Maybe you should stop thinking so much," he suggested, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. "Just feel." And in that moment, the world outside faded away. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the way Jake's eyes held mine, filled with a mixture of desire and challenge. I didn't know how long we sat there, locked in this unspoken battle. But as I looked at him, I could feel the walls I had built around my heart beginning to crack. The guilt that had been suffocating me felt distant, overshadowed by the heat rising between us. "Jake, I started, but the words caught in my throat. "Just say it," he urged, his voice low and inviting. "I want to," I breathed, the confession slipping out before I could stop myself. His lips curved into a satisfied smile, and I knew then that I was teetering on the edge of something dangerously exhilarating. I was a woman torn between duty and desire, caught in a web of temptation that I wasn't sure I wanted to escape. "Then let's stop pretending," he said, his voice a seductive promise. "Let's see where this takes us." And in that moment, I felt a thrill rush through me, an intoxicating mix of fear and excitement. I was standing at the precipice of something forbidden, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to jump or turn back. But as Jake leaned in closer, I realized I was ready to find out. I stepped into the living room, and the air felt thick with tension. There he was, Jake, sitting comfortably on the couch, his presence somehow both familiar and disconcerting. I hadn't expected to find him waiting for me. My heart raced as our eyes met, and a slow smile crept across his lips, igniting a spark of something deep within me. "Hey there," he said, his voice smooth, almost teasing. I could feel the weight of his gaze, sweeping over me like a warm caress. I tried to muster a casual response, but all I could think about was Tom, my husband, who was probably just a few rooms away, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Jake, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, but my voice betrayed me, laced with a mix of curiosity and dread. "I wanted to talk," he replied, leaning forward slightly, his eyes glinting with mischief. I felt a rush of heat at the way he looked at me, as if no one else mattered in that moment. The intimacy of the setting enveloped us, making it feel like we were the only two people in the world. I swallowed hard. my mind racing. What about? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications I couldn't ignore. What was I doing here, in this moment, with him? He tilted his head, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. About the project, and maybe a little more. The way he said it sent shivers down my spine. I knew what he meant, and it terrified me. A wave of guilt washed over me as I thought of Tom, who had been nothing but loving and supportive. My heart clenched at the thought of betraying him. Yet there was a thrill in the air, a dangerous allure that drew me closer to Jake. "Jake, I started, but the words caught in my throat. The excitement of being near him was intoxicating, clouding my judgment. I was torn between my loyalty to Tom and the magnetic pull I felt towards Jake. "Just hear me out," he urged, his voice dropping to a low, enticing whisper. "What if we could explore this, whatever this is between us?" His words sent a rush of adrenaline through me. It felt so wrong, yet so right, and I could feel my resolve wavering. The thrill of the unknown was a dangerous game, and I was dangerously close to losing myself in it. "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why not? It's just us, right here, right now," he said, his gaze piercing into mine. I could feel my heart racing uncontrollably, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. I closed my eyes for a moment, battling with my conscience, but when I opened them again, Jake was still there, looking at me in a way that made my stomach flutter. The tension was electric, and I felt a part of me wanting to lean into it, to abandon my fears, even if just for a moment. "What if someone finds out?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "Then they find out," he replied, a playful smile dancing on his lips. "But right now, all that matters is us." I felt a rush of desire wash over me, along with the guilt that quickly followed. Living a double life was exciting, yet terrifying. The thought of sneaking around behind Tom's back made me sick, yet the thrill of it filled me with a strange exhilaration. As I stood there, torn between right and wrong, I could feel the atmosphere shifting around us, thick with unspoken promises. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What do you want from me, Jake?" I finally asked, my voice steadying slightly. "I want to know what it feels like to be with you," he said, his sincerity cutting through the layers of tension. "I want to feel that spark we had from the first moment we met." His words resonated deep within me, igniting a fire I hadn't known existed. I remembered that day in Chicago, the way we had clicked instantly. The laughter, the stolen glances, and the way he made me feel alive. "I can't just forget about Tom," I said softly, my heart heavy with the weight of my reality. "Then don't forget about him," Jake replied. "Just explore what this could be, just for tonight." The way he looked at me, with such intensity, made my resolve crumble. The seduction of the moment was overwhelming, and I found myself caught between the life I had built with Tom and the thrill of the unknown with Jake. "What if I say yes?" I asked, my heart pounding as I contemplated the dangerous path ahead. "Then we'll make tonight unforgettable," he promised, his eyes sparkling with mischief. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I considered his words. The thought of stepping into a world of passion and desire, even if just for a moment, was too tempting to resist. I was on the brink of a choice that could change everything, and as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I walked into the living room, and there he was, Jake, my husband's business partner, casually leaning against the wall. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog. My heart raced as our eyes met. He looked at me with a smirk that sent chills down my spine. It was that seductive gaze that made my stomach flutter, even though a wave of guilt washed over me as I thought of Tom, my husband. "Hey there," Jake said, his voice low and inviting. "Hi," I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt like I was stepping into dangerous territory, and yet I couldn't pull myself away. The atmosphere in the room was intimate, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows that felt like secrets waiting to be shared. I wondered what I was doing here. "Tom had to step out for a bit. I hope you don't mind," he continued, taking a step closer. His presence was magnetic, and I could feel my resolve weakening. Every instinct told me to turn and leave, but the allure of the moment held me captive. "It's fine," I said, though I felt anything but fine. The guilt gnawed at me, yet there was an undeniable thrill in the air, a sense of excitement that I hadn't felt in ages. Jake's eyes sparkled with mischief, and I couldn't help but wonder if he felt the same tension between us. "What are you really doing here, Sarah?" he asked, his tone teasing yet serious. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I just came in to grab a book," I said, though it felt like the lamest excuse in the world. The truth was, I had come to see him, to feel that spark again, but I couldn't admit it. Jake chuckled softly, his gaze piercing through me. "You know, you don't have to pretend with me. I can see it in your eyes." "See what?" I asked, feigning innocence even as my cheeks flushed. "The way you look at me. It's electric." There was a challenge in his voice, a dare that made my heart race even faster. "Jake," I started, but words failed me. I wanted to tell him to stop, to back off, but part of me craved the connection we had. I thought of Tom, the man who loved me and who I had promised to be faithful to. Yet here I was, standing in front of his best friend, feeling torn and vulnerable. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, and I could feel the heat radiating from him. "What if I told you I want to take you somewhere? Somewhere we can talk, without interruptions?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. I could almost hear my heart pounding in my ears. Could I really do this? My mind raced with the thought of Tom, his smile, the way he looked at me with such love. But then there was Jake, so close and so dangerously tempting. "I don't know, Jake. This feels wrong," I said, my voice shaky. "Sometimes the wrong things feel so right." His words were like a spell, wrapping around me, pulling me in. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as I battled with my thoughts. "Just a drink," he pressed, his voice smooth. "No pressure, just two friends, catching up." The way he said friends made my heart skip a beat. The line between friendship and something more was blurring, and I could feel myself teetering on the edge of a decision. "Okay," I finally said, my voice barely audible. The moment I said it, I felt a thrill of excitement mixed with dread. I was about to cross a line I had promised never to approach. Jake's smile was intoxicating, a blend of triumph and desire. "Let's go then," he said, taking my hand in his. His touch sent a jolt through me, and I felt my resolve crumbling. I looked back towards the door, knowing Tom would be back soon, but the pull of Jake was too strong. We left the house, the night air wrapping around us like a cloak of secrecy. The bar was dimly lit, a quiet corner away from prying eyes. As we sat across from each other, the conversation flowed easily, laced with flirtation. "I didn't expect to see you tonight," he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "But I'm glad you did." "Me too," I admitted, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "I've been thinking about you. About us." Jake's eyes sparkled with mischief, and he leaned in closer. "What if I told you I've been thinking about you too? A lot." My breath caught in my throat. The thrill of the moment was intoxicating, and I felt as if I was stepping into a different world, one that was filled with excitement and danger. Before I knew it, we were leaving the bar together, the night unfolding in a haze of adrenaline and desire. I was acutely aware of the consequences, but the rush of being with him overshadowed the fear. As we entered the hotel room, it felt like the world outside had disappeared. The adrenaline surged through my veins, and I knew I was about to cross a line that would change everything. But for that moment, all I could think about was Jake and the thrill of the unknown. I stepped into the living room, and my heart raced at the sight of Jake sitting there, waiting. The tension in the air was almost tangible, wrapping around me like a thick fog. He looked up, and our eyes locked. That look he gave me, a mix of mischief and desire, sent a shiver down my spine. It was seductive, almost magnetic, and I felt my cheeks flush under his gaze. "Hey there," he said, a playful smile dancing on his lips. "Hi," I managed to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. The moment I spoke, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Tom, my husband, was somewhere in the house, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. I could almost hear his laughter echoing in my mind, a stark reminder of the life I had built and the vows I had taken. "What are you doing here?" I thought, the question echoing in my head like a relentless drum. I wanted to turn and walk away, to escape the pull I felt towards Jake, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow from the lamps creating an intimate atmosphere that felt like an invitation to cross a line I had never intended to approach. Jake leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving mine. "I thought we could talk. You know, about the project," he said, his voice low and inviting. "Right," I said, forcing a smile as I tried to ignore the flutter in my stomach. But it was more than just a project, wasn't it? The air around us was charged with something deeper, something thrilling, yet terrifying. I felt a rush of excitement mixed with dread. This was not how it was supposed to be. As he spoke, I tried to focus on his words, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal creeping in. Every glance and every smile felt like a betrayal to Tom. He had trusted me. I had promised to be faithful. Yet here I was, standing in a room with a man who made my heart race and my mind spin with possibilities. "Do you ever think about what could happen if we let this go too far?" Jake asked suddenly, his tone shifting to something more serious. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. "I don't know what you mean," I replied, but my voice trembled, betraying the truth I was trying to hide. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing through the fog of my confusion. "You know exactly what I mean. This chemistry between us. It's electric." The way he said it sent a thrill through me, and I felt my resolve weakening. "But what about Tom?" I whispered, the guilt surfacing again. Jake's expression softened, and he reached out, brushing his fingers against my hand. "Tom doesn't have to know. This can be our little secret." I pulled my hand back, a rush of panic filling me. "It's not just a secret, Jake. It's wrong." "Is it?" He countered, his brow raised. "What if it feels right? What if it's something we both want?" I wanted to scream, to tell him to stop, to remind him that I was married. But the truth was, I was intrigued. The thrill of danger wrapped around me like a warm blanket. And for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to follow that desire. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "Because I can't help it," he replied, his voice low and sincere. "You're amazing, and I want to know you. All of you." The room felt smaller, the air thicker, and I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I thought of Tom, his unwavering love, his kindness, and the life we had built together. But in the same breath, I thought of Jake, the thrill of his presence, the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. "What are you doing to me?" I asked again, more to myself than to him. Jake stood up, closing the distance between us. I'm just inviting you to see what could be. You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it." As he leaned in closer, I could feel the heat radiating from him, the intoxicating scent of his cologne engulfing me. I was torn between my loyalty to Tom and the undeniable connection I felt with Jake. The question lingered in my mind, echoing louder than ever. What am I doing here? In that moment, I knew I was standing at a precipice, and the choice ahead of me would change everything. But as I looked into Jake's eyes, the temptation was almost too much to bear. I stepped into the living room, the air thick with a tension I could almost taste. There he was, Jake, waiting for me, his presence commanding and undeniably magnetic. My heart raced as his gaze met mine, a sultry look that sent shivers down my spine. It felt as though the room had shrunk around us, making this moment all the more intimate. I instinctively thought of Tom, my husband, and a wave of guilt washed over me. What was I doing here? "Hey," Jake said, his voice low and inviting, breaking the silence that hung between us. "Hi," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I could feel my pulse quickening, each beat reminding me of the promise I had made to Tom. Yet, here I was, drawn to Jake like a moth to a flame. He took a step closer, the air crackling with unspoken words. "I wasn't sure if you would come." "Neither was I admitted, my heart pounding as I fought against the pull of temptation. But I couldn't resist. The way he looked at me, those dark eyes filled with a mix of desire and something deeper, made me forget my surroundings. I glanced around the room, the soft lighting casting shadows that danced along the walls, creating an atmosphere that felt too inviting, too charged with possibility. "What are we doing?" I thought, panic rising within me. But the question echoed in my mind, unanswered and heavy. Jake stepped even closer, his presence enveloping me. "I've missed you," he said simply, his hand brushing lightly against my arm, igniting a spark that sent a rush of heat through my body. I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. I should be thinking about Tom, about the life we built together, but all I could focus on was Jake, standing there with that easy charisma and an undeniable allure that pulled me in. "I shouldn't be here," I said, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "What if Tom finds out?" "He won't," Jake replied, his tone confident, almost reassuring. "It's just you and me right now. Just us." The words hung in the air, tempting me with the promise of something forbidden. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and excitement. I wanted to turn back, to walk away and never look back. But the way Jake was looking at me, the heat in his gaze, made it almost impossible to resist. "I should go," I said, though my feet felt rooted to the spot. "Stay a little longer," he urged, his voice smooth and persuasive. "Just enjoy the moment." I hesitated, caught between the desire to flee and the magnetic pull towards him. The memory of Tom's loving smile flashed through my mind, a painful reminder of my commitment. But the intimate atmosphere of the room, coupled with Jake's proximity, made my resolve waver. "What are you doing to me?" I whispered, my heart racing as I battled with my emotions. "I'm not doing anything," he said, his expression softening. "I just want you to be honest with yourself. There's something between us, and you know it." The truth of his words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I could feel the connection, the chemistry that had been simmering beneath the surface since the day we met. It was wrong, so incredibly wrong, but it felt so right at the same time. "I can't," I said, shaking my head, desperation creeping into my voice. "I can't betray him like this." Jake stepped back slightly, giving me a moment to breathe. "You're not betraying him if you're being true to yourself," he countered gently. "You deserve to feel alive, to feel desired." His words echoed in my mind, a siren call drawing me deeper into his world. A part of me wanted to scream, to run away and never look back. But another part, the one that craved excitement and passion, wanted to surrender to this moment, to embrace the thrill of the unknown. As I stood there, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I realized I was faced with a choice. I could walk away, back to my safe but predictable life with Tom, or I could take a leap into the dark, into something that felt exhilarating and terrifying all at once. "What do I do?" I murmured, my voice trembling as I looked up at Jake, searching for answers in his eyes. "You follow your heart," he said softly, stepping closer once more. "You deserve to be happy." And in that moment, as I gazed into his enticing eyes, I felt the walls I had built around myself begin to crumble. The weight of my guilt was heavy, but the allure of the unknown was intoxicating. I was at a crossroads, and with every second that ticked by, the decision loomed larger and larger. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with possibilities, as the question echoed louder than ever. "What am I doing here?" The moment I stepped into the living room, I felt a wave of tension wash over me. There he was, Jake, my husband Tom's business partner, sitting on our couch as if he owned the place. His presence was striking, and as our eyes met, he flashed that seductive smile that had always made my heart race. I froze for a second, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. What was I doing here? "Hey, I didn't expect to see you," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. I forced a smile, but inside I felt a rush of guilt. Tom was upstairs, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. The memory of our last encounter flickered in my mind, a reminder of my betrayal. My heart pounded as I tried to suppress the guilt creeping in. I wanted to scream, to run away, but instead, I stood there, captivated by Jake's presence. The room felt intimate, almost too intimate for comfort. The soft lighting and the plush furniture made it seem like a scene from a movie, one I never thought I'd be a part of. My thoughts raced. What am I doing here? The question echoed in my mind, taunting me. I felt like I was stepping into a dangerous game, one I was not sure I could play. Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on me. "Are you all right? You look a bit tense." His concern was genuine, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of warmth. "I'm fine, just surprised to see you here," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. He chuckled softly, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Surprised? You shouldn't be. We're partners after all. I thought we could discuss the project." "Right," I managed to say, trying to focus on anything but the tension between us. But as I spoke, I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Every glance he cast my way felt electric, igniting a desire I couldn't ignore. "Tom's not here, is he?" Jake asked, his tone playful yet probing. "No, he's out for the evening," I replied, my pulse quickening. Why was I sharing these details? I could feel the weight of my secrets hanging heavily between us. Jake's smile widened, and for a moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to lean closer, to close the distance that separated us. But the thought of Tom came crashing back in, a cold reminder of the life I was supposed to be living. "Maybe we can talk about the project later then?" Jake suggested, his voice low and inviting. I swallowed hard, the air thick with unspoken words. "Maybe," I replied, but the word felt like a promise I couldn't keep. As we sat there, the tension became almost unbearable. A part of me wanted to flee, to escape the temptation that Jake represented, while another part felt drawn to him like a moth to a flame. I was teetering on the edge of something dangerous, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist. "Do you ever think about what could happen if we let go of all this?" Jake asked suddenly, His eyes locked onto mine with a fierce intensity. The question sent a shiver down my spine. My heart raced as I considered his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to play it cool. But inside, my mind was spiraling. He leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know exactly what I mean. The chemistry between us is undeniable. We don't have to pretend." I wanted to deny it, to tell him that I was committed to Tom, that I loved him. But the truth was, I felt alive in Jake's presence, in a way I hadn't in a long time. The guilt washed over me again, but it was mixed with an exhilarating thrill. "What are you saying, Jake?" I asked, my voice trembling, unsure of where this conversation was heading. He moved closer, and I could feel the heat radiating off him. "I'm saying that maybe we should explore this connection, just a little. Just a little." The words hung in the air, sweet and dangerous. I wanted to scream, to run, but a part of me was intrigued, drawn to the idea of stepping into a world where I could be free from the constraints of my marriage, if only for a moment. Before I could reply, he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. The contact sent a jolt through me, igniting a fire I didn't know I had. I pulled my hand away, but the heat lingered, and I could see the desire reflected in his eyes. "Just think about it," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. I nodded, my mind racing. I was caught between two worlds, one where I had a loving husband and a life built on promises, and another where I could lose myself in the thrill of the unknown. As I looked into Jake's eyes, I felt a wave of longing wash over me. The allure of the forbidden was intoxicating, and I knew I was teetering on the edge of a decision that could change everything. The question lingered. Could I really resist the temptation that was Jake? I walked into the living room, my heart racing as I spotted Jake sitting there, waiting for me. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog, wrapping around us both. He looked up, and our eyes locked. The seductive glint in his gaze sent shivers down my spine. I felt a rush of excitement mingled with a heavy blanket of guilt, the memory of Tom, my husband, creeping into my thoughts. What was I doing here? The room felt intimate, the soft glow of the lamps casting shadows that seemed to dance around us. I shifted nervously, trying to steady myself. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out the world outside. Jake leaned forward, an amused smile playing on his lips. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he teased, his voice low and inviting. I forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow even to my own ears. "Just surprised to see you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I glanced away, not wanting him to see the conflict within me. The thrill of being near him was intoxicating, but the weight of my marriage loomed heavily over me like a dark cloud. Jake stood up, his presence commanding the space between us. "I know this is unexpected, but I couldn't help but want to see you again." His words hung in the air, charged with a promise that sent my mind racing. I remembered the way he had looked at me the last time we were together, the way my skin had tingled under his gaze. "Jake, we shouldn't," I began, but the words felt weak, as if I were trying to convince myself more than him. My thoughts flickered to Tom, his smile, his warmth. He had no idea about my growing connection with Jake, and the thought of hurting him twisted my stomach. "Why not?" Jake interrupted, stepping closer. The scent of his cologne enveloped me, and I inhaled deeply, feeling a rush of desire. "We have a connection. Don't you feel it? We've been dancing around it long enough." His voice was smooth, like honey, and it wrapped around me, making it hard to think straight. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the pull I felt towards him. "I'm married, Jake. I can't." But even as I said it, I felt the words falter. The thrill of being near him was too strong. "What if it's just one weekend?" he suggested, his eyes glinting with mischief. Just you and me, away from all this. No one has to know. The idea sent a rush of excitement through me, along with a wave of fear. I imagined the freedom of escaping my life, even just for a short time. But then, Tom's face flashed in my mind, and the guilt threatened to choke me. I couldn't betray him like that, could I? Jake, I started, but my voice trailed off. The temptation was overwhelming. I felt like a moth drawn to a flame, knowing it was dangerous but unable to resist. Just think about it, Jake said, his voice dropping to a whisper. A chance to be ourselves, without the weight of the world on our shoulders. I turned away, staring out the window at the darkness outside. My heart raced with the thought of being alone with him, of giving in to the desire that had been simmering between us for so long. But then I thought of Tom, who trusted me completely. I don't know, Jake. I need time, I replied, my voice shaky. Take all the time you need, he said, stepping back slightly, giving me space. But his eyes still held that alluring promise, a challenge I felt deep within me. I could sense the excitement bubbling beneath the surface, urging me to make a choice. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken words and hidden desires. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. What would I be willing to risk for a taste of freedom, for a chance to be with someone who ignited a fire within me? I'll think about it, I finally said, my mind racing with possibilities and consequences. Jake smiled, a slow, confident smile that made my heart skip. That's all I ask. Just think about it. As I turned to leave the room, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. I was standing at the edge of a precipice, and the question lingered in my mind like a haunting melody. What was I willing to sacrifice for a moment of passion? I stepped into the living room, my heart racing. The air was thick with tension, and there he was, Jake, waiting for me. The moment our eyes met, he flashed a smile that sent shivers down my spine. It was a smile filled with mischief, and I felt a jolt of something dangerous stir within me. Hi there, he said, his voice smooth and inviting. It sent a wave of warmth through me, igniting a fire I dared not acknowledge. I forced a smile in return, but inside, guilt washed over me like a cold wave. I thought of Tom, my husband, who was probably just outside, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in this room. What are you doing here? I asked, trying to sound casual, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. The intimate setting felt like it was closing in, urging us towards something I wasn't sure I was ready for. Jake stepped closer, his gaze piercing. I wanted to talk. It's been a while since we've had a moment alone. The question echoed in my mind. What am I doing here? I should be at home, with Tom, not standing inches away from a man who made my heart race in a way I hadn't felt in years. I glanced around the room, as if the walls could provide a shield from the magnetic pull between us. But there was no escaping it. I can't, I stammered, my mind racing. I could almost hear Tom's laughter, the way he made me feel safe and loved. Yet, here was Jake, igniting a part of me that had long been dormant. The guilt was suffocating, but the thrill was intoxicating. Just one conversation, Jake insisted, his voice low and enticing. We can keep it casual. I swallowed hard, torn between the life I had built and the undeniable connection I felt with him. What if Tom finds out? I whispered, my heart pounding. Jake stepped even closer. The warmth radiating from him was overwhelming. He won't, I promise. Just let yourself feel. I hesitated, my heart racing between fear and desire. The atmosphere was charged, and I could feel the weight of our unspoken words hanging in the air. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. Jake, this isn't right. Is it wrong to want something that feels this good? He challenged, his eyes never leaving mine. The intensity of his gaze made my breath hitch. In that moment, I felt an undeniable pull towards him, a desire that was hard to resist. I could almost taste the thrill of the unknown, the excitement of stepping into a forbidden territory. But I was also painfully aware of the consequences. "Jake," I said, my voice trembling, "I can't betray Tom like this." "You're not betraying him if you're being true to yourself," he replied softly. The way his words flowed sent a shiver down my spine. I felt a flicker of rebellion ignite within me. What if I allowed myself to feel? What if I let go just for a moment? But then the image of Tom flashed in my mind, his smile, the way he looked at me with love. It was a stark reminder of what I had to lose. Yet standing here with Jake, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in ages. "I should go," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I turned to leave, but Jake's hand shot out, gently gripping my wrist. "Wait," he said, his voice firm yet soft. "Just think about it. You deserve to feel passion, don't you?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I wanted to scream that I did, that I craved it more than I could say, but the guilt was a weight I couldn't shake off. "I need to go," I repeated, pulling my wrist free. I took a step back, creating space between us. The distance felt like a lifeline, yet it also felt like a loss. "Just promise you'll think about it," Jake said, his tone pleading. I nodded, my mind racing. "I will, but I can't promise anything." As I turned to leave, I caught one last glimpse of him. His expression was a mixture of longing and frustration, and I felt a pang in my chest. The door closed behind me, sealing off the intoxicating tension that had filled the room. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened. I could hear Tom's voice in the kitchen, humming to himself, and the warmth of home enveloped me. Yet, my heart was still racing from the encounter, caught between two worlds, two desires. I sighed, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had entered that room with a clear intention, but now I felt lost, trapped in a web of longing and guilt that threatened to consume me.